My wife and I were on our way home from a corporate event when I suddenly got a text on my phone. First, I didn't even check it. Jessica was talking, her voice filling the car as she went on about how the night had been a success, how her boss had complimented her, how she had smoothed things over with some difficult client. I nodded along, not really listening, my eyes on the road. The city outside was alive with lights, people moving between bars and restaurants, the usual Friday night chaos. The phone buzzed again, then again. Jessica didn't seem to notice. She was too busy fixing her lipstick in the vanity mirror, pressing her lips together and pouting slightly before flipping it shut. I reached for my phone at the next red light. 3 messages. The first was from an unknown number.
Hey, man.
You don't know me, but you need to know this. I frowned. Opened the next one. Your wife is cheating on you. I have proof. My mouth went dry. The light turned green, and I barely reacted, only moving forward when the car behind me honked impatiently. My mind was scrambling. My thoughts a chaotic mess of denial, anger, confusion. This had to be some kind of sick joke. A scam. Someone trying to mess with me. The third message came in. Picture. I shouldn't have looked. I should have waited until we got home, until I was alone. But something inside me forced my eyes down. It was Jessica. Jessica, in a dimly lit hotel room, her back turned to the camera, wearing nothing but the same dress she had on tonight, sliding off her shoulders as a man's hands gripped her waist. I nearly swerved into the next lane. Whoa, what the hell? Jessica yelped, grabbing the handle above the door. Are you trying to kill us? I pulled the car over. I couldn't drive. Not like this. My hands felt like they weren't even attached to my body anymore. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. Jessica was staring at me. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I turned, slowly, and held up my phone so she could see the screen. For a second, she didn't react. Just blinked. Then, in the most controlled, unnervingly casual voice, she said, "Where did you get that?" Not "oh my God." Not "it's not what it looks like." Not even a gasp or a flinch. Just a flat, emotionless "where did you get that?" That was the moment I knew. I had always thought I'd know how I'd react to something like this. I imagined fury, screaming, throwing things, demanding the truth. But what I felt was worse. Cold. Everything inside me was cold. Who is he? My voice didn't even sound like my own. Jessica sighed. Actually sighed. Like I had just asked her to take out the trash. This is not the place for this conversation. I let out a sharp laugh. It didn't even sound right. Not the place? Are you kidding me? You? I waved the phone in front of her. You're caught, red-handed. And your response is this is not the place. She crossed her arms and turned to stare out the window. I'm not doing this right now. She wasn't even denying it. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I wanted to scream at her, shake her, make her react, but she just sat there, as if this wasn't a big deal, as if she was the one who had the right to be annoyed. And then, in the most insane, mind-blowing display of audacity I had ever witnessed, she turned back to me and said, "Can we just go home?
I'm tired."
That's when I realized something. Jessica wasn't just a liar. She was a professional. I didn't move. Couldn't. My body felt frozen. My fingers gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought they might snap. Jessica, on the other hand, was completely composed. Like this was just another minor inconvenience in her day. Like she had been caught cheating before and already knew the script. I turned off the ignition. The silence that followed was suffocating. Who is he? I asked again, slower this time. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Can we not do this here? Her voice was sharp now, edged with irritation, like I was the one making a scene, like I was the one being unreasonable. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't regretful. She was just annoyed. That was the first moment I truly understood who I was married to. Jessica? I said, my voice steady but tight. You have 10 seconds to start explaining Before you what? She interrupted, turning to face me fully now. Throw me out of the car? Yell at me in the middle of the street? What do you want? Huh? You want some big dramatic confession? You want me to cry? Say I'm sorry? Is that what you need?
Hier.
She wasn't panicking. She wasn't desperate. There were no tears, no guilt, No stammering apologies. No, it was a mistake. Or it didn't mean anything. She didn't care. The weight of that realization crushed something inside me. Jessica sighed again, as if she was just so exhausted by my nonsense. Then she reached for the door handle. I'm calling an Uber. I don't have the energy for this. I grabbed her wrist before she could step out. Not hard, not rough, just enough to stop her. She finally looked at me, actually looked at me, and I saw it, the flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear, not guilt, annoyance. She had no intention of telling me the truth. Let go of me, she said quietly. You're going to tell me everything, I said. Right now. Jessica exhaled sharply. Then, like this was some kind of negotiation, she said, Fine, I'll tell you, but not here. Let's go home. I didn't trust her, but I had to know. I started the car again. Neither of us spoke the whole way home. As soon as we stepped into the house, Jessica kicked off her heels and walked straight to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine like she had just come back from a normal night out. I was still standing by the door, my whole world in pieces, while she leaned against the counter, swirling the wine in her glass, looking at me like I was the one who owed her an explanation. So, she said casually, taking a sip, where did you get that picture? I blinked. Excuse me? The picture. She tilted her head. Who sent it to you? I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. Are you serious right now? Jessica set the glass down. I just think it's interesting that some random person has pictures of me and felt the need to send them to you. She was trying to flip it, shift the conversation, make me question things. It was actually unbelievable. Jessica? I said, stepping closer. Did you cheat on me? She didn't answer immediately. She looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding what version of the truth she wanted to go with. Then she shrugged. Define cheating. I swear to God. Something inside me snapped that I had always thought that if I were ever cheated on, the hardest part would be the betrayal itself. The moment of discovering the truth. The heartbreak. The grief. I was wrong. The hardest part was this. Standing in my own kitchen, staring at my wife, as she leaned against the counter, her lips still stained with the wine she had just sipped, tilting her head in mock curiosity, asking me to define cheating. Are you actually serious right now? My voice came out low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that even I could hear. Jessica crossed her arms and sighed. You're the one freaking out over a picture, so let's be clear. What exactly are you accusing me of? She was stalling, playing for time, trying to twist the conversation, make me second-guess myself, like I was some paranoid idiot who had misread the situation. I wasn't playing her game. I'm accusing you of exactly what it looks like, Jessica, I said. Of meeting up with some guy, taking your dress off, and letting him put his hands on you. Or do I need to pull the picture up again? She tensed. It was quick. So quick that if I hadn't been watching her like a hawk, I might have missed it. But it was there. A flicker of something. Annoyance. Not regret. Not shame. Annoyance. Jessica exhaled through her nose and ran a hand through her hair, like she was debating how much effort this was even worth. Look, she said finally. If you really need me to say it, fine. Yes, I was with someone. But you don't even know the full story, and you're already jumping to conclusions. I almost laughed. Jumping to conclusions? You're unbelievable. She gave me a look. The same one she used to give me when I forgot to unload the dishwasher or left my socks on the floor. You're being dramatic, the look said. You're making this harder than it needs to be. And that was when it really hit me. Jessica hadn't just cheated. She had never respected me. Not as a husband. Not as a person. Because no one who had even an ounce of respect for their partner would act like this after being caught. No one would stand there, wine in hand, trying to gaslight their way out of something so obvious. I stared at her, feeling something shift inside me. Something breaking. Something being ripped away, leaving behind a version of myself I barely recognized. So that's it? I asked. You're not even going to try to deny it? Jessica shrugged. What's the point? You've already made up your mind. I took a slow step closer. Not threatening, just close enough to really look at her, to see her face, her expression, her complete lack of remorse. Who is he? I asked. Jessica smirked. Actually smirked. "Oh, now you want details?" she said, her tone almost teasing. "I thought you had it all figured out already." My fingers curled into fists at my sides. "Jessica, who is he?" She stared at me for a long moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, she said, "You've met him before." I felt the floor tilt beneath me, because suddenly all the puzzle pieces were snapping into place. The late nights, the sudden obsession with her phone, the work trips that never quite added up. And now, the final clue. I had met him before, and there was only one name that came to mind. A name that made my stomach turn. Jessica watched me, waiting, that same amused little smirk still playing on her lips. She wanted me to say it. She wanted me to realize. And when I finally did, I felt like I was going to be sick. The name sat on my tongue like poison. My whole body tensed, every muscle locked in place, my mind racing through the last few months. No, the last year, trying to pinpoint every moment that suddenly made sense now. Jessica was still watching me, enjoying this, enjoying it. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't nervous. She was waiting, waiting for me to put the final piece together. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry, my stomach twisted in knots, but I forced the name out anyway. "Daniel." Jessica's lips twitched. Not a full smile, just enough to confirm it. I took a step back, like the distance would somehow make this feel less real. My mind was spinning. My head actually hurt from the sheer weight of what I was processing. Daniel, my friend, my best friend, the man who had been in my house, the man I had trusted, the man who had clapped me on the shoulder just last weekend and said, "Man, you're lucky. Jess is one hell of a woman." The same man who had been sleeping with her behind my back. Jessica tilted her head, watching me like I was some kind of science experiment. "You look pale," she said. "Do you want to sit down?" I almost lost it. I could feel my heart slamming against my ribs, the blood rushing to my face, my vision blurring at the edges. "How long?" My voice was raw. Jessica sighed, like I was making this so much more dramatic than it needed to be. She took another sip of her wine, took her time setting the glass down, then shrugged. A while. Not weeks, not months. A while. That word alone shattered me. I braced my hands on the back of a chair, trying to steady myself, my mind racing through the past year. Every time Jessica had come home late, every time she had pulled away from me, making some excuse about being tired or stressed, every time Daniel had joked with me, smiled at me, lied to me. "You're telling me," I said, my voice eerily calm, "that you've been screwing my best friend for a while." Jessica leaned against the counter, stretching out her legs like she was getting comfortable. "I mean, if you want to phrase it like that, sure." The casualness of it almost knocked the air from my lungs. I ran a hand down my face, trying to keep myself from completely breaking apart. "Why?" I finally asked. Jessica blinked, like the question had never even occurred to her. "Why?" she repeated, laughing lightly. "What kind of question is that?" I straightened. "It's a simple one." She rolled her eyes, as if I was the one being ridiculous. Then she picked up her wine glass again, swirling the last bit of liquid inside before shrugging. "I don't know. It just happened." That was it. That was her answer. It just happened. Like an accident. Like something beyond her control. Like she had just tripped and fallen into bed with him. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even shocked. I was furious. I stepped closer, and for the first time that night, Jessica actually straightened a little, her grip tightening on her glass. "You don't know?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You don't know why you betrayed your husband? Your best friend? Your own marriage?" Jessica exhaled, tapping her nails against the glass. "I mean, if you really want me to say it." She paused, then gave me a slow, deliberate smirk. "Maybe I just got bored." I didn't even realize I had moved until I saw her flinch. I hadn't touched her. I hadn't even raised my hands. But something in my expression must have finally unsettled her. For the first time that night, she looked nervous. And she should have been. The moment she said it, "Maybe I just got bored," something inside me shattered. Not in the way you'd think. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. A cold, sharp realization that cut through the fog of my emotions like a blade. Jessica had never loved me. Not in the way I had loved her. Not in the way I had trusted her. She had been entertained by me the same way someone is entertained by a new toy, a new restaurant, a new hobby. And the second I wasn't enough, the second she found someone more exciting, she had tossed me aside like I was nothing. She saw the shift in me. I could tell. For the first time, I was unreadable to her. Her smirk faltered. "You're quiet," she said, watching me carefully. "Finally run out of things to say?" I studied her. I wanted to understand what kind of person could do this, could sit across from the person they vowed to love and break them piece by piece without a second thought. I wanted to ask why me, but I already knew the answer. It wasn't personal. It wasn't even about me. Jessica would have done this to anyone, because that's just who she was. I nodded slowly. "All right." She raised a brow. "All right?" I met her gaze. Calm. Controlled. "Yeah, all right." Jessica narrowed her eyes. She expected a fight. She wanted one. She wanted me to scream, throw things, beg for answers that she'd never give me. She wanted me to react. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I turned, heading for the bedroom. She called after me. "Oh, so that's it? You're just going to storm off? That's mature." I ignored her. My hands were steady as I grabbed the nearest suitcase and started throwing my things inside. Jessica appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Wow, you're leaving? That's funny. I figured you'd be the type to at least try to fix things." I let out a breathless laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so insane that I didn't know how else to react. Fix things? She had gutted our marriage, set it on fire, and stood over the ashes with a smirk. And now she thought I should be the one to salvage it? I zipped up the suitcase and turned to face her. "You want me to stay?" She shrugged. "I don't care what you do. I just didn't peg you as a coward." There it was. The bait. The hook. I didn't bite. I grabbed my keys, slung the suitcase over my shoulder, and walked past her. Jessica followed me to the front door. "Where are you even going to go?" I didn't answer. She laughed. Actually laughed. "God, you're so dramatic." I turned to look at her one last time, and for the first time in years, I saw her clearly. Not my wife. Not the woman I had built a life with. Just a stranger. A cruel, empty stranger. I nodded to myself. "You know what, Jessica?" I said, voice even. "You're right. I did get something wrong." She raised a brow. "Oh." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I thought I married a good person." Jessica's expression darkened, but I didn't wait for a reply. I opened the door, stepped outside, and shut it behind me. And just like that, I was free. The second I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a slap to the face. It was cold, crisp, carrying the distant hum of cars and the faint laughter of people enjoying their night. People whose lives weren't crumbling to dust in real time. I stood there for a moment, suitcase in hand, my breath coming out uneven. My heart was still pounding, my skin still burning from the conversation that had just taken place. I had walked out. I had actually walked out. I thought I'd feel relief, or anger, or something, but all I felt was hollow, like my body hadn't caught up to what had just happened, like my brain was still buffering, trying to process the fact that my marriage, my entire life, had just collapsed in the span of an hour. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a split second, I thought it was Jessica, but no, of course not. She wasn't the type to chase after someone. She had won. She had gotten what she wanted. I pulled the phone out and glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number.
"Hey man."
"Did you confront her?" It was them. The person who had sent me the photos. My pulse spiked. I had forgotten about them in the chaos of everything. The person who had blown my entire world apart with a few messages. The person who, at this point, probably knew more about my marriage than I did. I exhaled sharply and typed back. "Yeah." I walked out. The response was almost instant. "Good. You deserve better." I stared at the screen, something uneasy curling in my stomach. Who was this? I hesitated before typing again. "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a response. "Not important. Just someone who thought you should know the truth." That wasn't an answer. That was a deflection. I frowned. "How did you get those photos?" This time, the reply took longer. When it came, it wasn't what I expected. You don't want to know. A chill ran down my spine. I tightened my grip on the phone. I think I do. There was another pause. Then finally, Fine. Meet me at Malone's Diner in 20 minutes. I stared at the message, my heart thudding in my chest. Every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to ignore it, to go find a hotel, to not meet some random stranger in the middle of the night just because they had a few answers. But another part of me, the part that had just watched my wife sip wine while admitting to years of betrayal, the part of me that couldn't stomach walking away without knowing everything, was already opening my car door. I needed the truth. Even if I wasn't ready for it. Malone's Diner was the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. Faded red booths, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked in years, the smell of burnt coffee and greasy food hanging in the air. A place where truckers and night shift workers passed through, where secrets could be spoken in hushed voices over half-eaten plates of fries. I pushed open the door, the little bell overhead jingling as I stepped inside. A waitress glanced up from behind the counter, barely paying me any attention before going back to wiping down a coffee cup. My eyes swept the diner, searching, and then I saw them. A man, sitting alone in a corner booth, hood pulled up over his head, fingers drumming against the table. As soon as our eyes met, he gestured for me to sit. I hesitated for only a second before walking over. Sliding into the booth across from him, I got my first real look at his face. Young, mid-20s maybe, sharp features, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. But it was his expression that unsettled me. He wasn't smug. He wasn't gloating about blowing up my marriage. He looked tense, like this wasn't just about Jessica, like this was bigger. Glad you came, he said, voice low. Yeah, I muttered, still studying him. You going to tell me who you are now? He exhaled, then pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. The screen was already unlocked, a gallery of photos open. More photos, more of Jessica. But these weren't like the one I had already seen. These weren't just hotel rooms. These were different men, different places, some taken years ago. My stomach lurched. I couldn't even move, couldn't breathe. As I scrolled through them, each one worse than the last. How long have you had these? My voice barely sounded like my own. The guy rubbed a hand over his jaw. A while. That word again. Why did you send them to me? His jaw tightened. Because I figured if I knew, then eventually someone else would find out too. Someone who wouldn't just send you photos. He leaned in slightly. Someone who'd go straight to her boss, or her family, or hell. Someone who wouldn't just tell you, but tell the whole *****ng world. I swallowed hard. And you? I asked carefully. Who are you in all this? His eyes darkened. Daniel's little brother. It was like all the air had been sucked from the room. I blinked. I actually blinked, like I had misheard him, like my brain needed a second to catch up. What? He leaned back, arms crossed. Yeah, my name's Chris, and I'm the idiot who thought his brother was a decent person. I stared at him. Why would you? Because he used me. Chris cut in. Just like he used you. Just like she used you. His fingers curled into fists on the table. Because for years, I thought he was some big-shot businessman, someone I could actually look up to. Then I started noticing things. Inconsistencies. Lies. And then I found this. He gestured to his phone. I realized exactly the kind of person he was. I shook my head, still trying to process. So you what? Went full private investigator. Chris let out a dry laugh. More like full idiot. I thought I could talk to him, call him out, make him see what he was doing. He exhaled. You know what he did? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Chris smiled, but there was no humor in it. He laughed, told me I was naive, that guys like us don't settle down, that loyalty is a joke, that some people are just meant to be played. His voice tightened. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Jessica. This was about every person he'd ever screwed over. And it was never going to stop. I let out a slow breath. I had spent all night believing Jessica was the worst person in this mess, that she was the heart of the betrayal, the mastermind behind my humiliation. But I had been wrong, because Daniel had known. He had known what this would do to me, had looked me in the eye, smiled in my face, and done it anyway. And now, sitting in a dingy diner at midnight, looking at his own brother, someone he had manipulated just as easily, I realized something terrifying. Jessica didn't regret what she had done. And neither did Daniel. They had never cared. Not about me. Not about Chris. Not about anyone but themselves. I set the phone down. My hands weren't even shaking anymore. I knew what I had to do. And for the first time all night, I finally felt like myself again. That I sat there for a long moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But instead of breaking me, it sharpened me. There was no more shock. No more disbelief. Just clarity. Jessica and Daniel had never cared. Not about me. Not about Chris. Not about anyone. They had lied, manipulated, and walked all over us without hesitation, without a second thought. But here's the thing about people like them: they always think they're untouchable. They think they can do whatever they want and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. I exhaled slowly and met Chris's gaze. "How far are you willing to take this?" Chris studied me for a second, then leaned in. "As far as we need to." I nodded. "Good." I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Daniel's name. My thumb hovered over the call button. Chris's eyes flicked to the screen. "You're calling him now?" "Yeah," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Let's see how good of a liar he really is." Before Chris could respond, I hit the button. It rang twice before Daniel picked up. His voice came through the speaker. Smooth. Relaxed. Like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't the kind of man who had spent years destroying the people closest to him. "Hey man," he said. Like this was just any other night. "What's up?" I smiled to myself. "Not much. Just left Jessica at home. Thought I'd check in on my best friend." Chris stiffened across from me, watching intently. Daniel chuckled. "Damn. Checking in? You getting soft on me?" I forced a laugh. "Maybe." A pause. Then, in the most casual voice I could manage, I said, "Where you at?" There was a slight hesitation. It was brief, so brief that if I wasn't waiting for it, I might have missed it. But I did not miss it. Then Daniel let out a breath. "Just at home, man. Long day. You know how it is." Chris and I locked eyes. He was lying. And now we had him. I leaned back in the booth, tapping my fingers against the table. "Yeah? Funny. Because Jessica said she was heading to bed early. But when I got home, she wasn't there." Silence. It lasted only a second, but that second told me everything. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Huh. Weird. Maybe she went to the store or something." I almost laughed. His confidence was unbelievable. He was backed into a corner, and he still thought he could talk his way out of it. I let the silence drag out just long enough to make him sweat. Then I said, "Hey, you ever been to Malone's Diner?" Daniel let out a short, nervous laugh. "What?" Chris grinned. "I'm sitting here right now," I continued, voice steady, "talking to someone really interesting. Wanna guess who?" Daniel was quiet. Chris leaned forward slightly, whispering, "Say my name." I held back a smirk. "Your brother says hi, by the way." Dead silence. Chris's eyes gleamed with something dark. Daniel had spent years treating us both like fools, like disposable people he could use and toss aside. But now he was the one scrambling. "Listen," Daniel finally said, his voice lower now, more serious. "I don't know what he told you, but you gotta understand I cut him off. "Save it. I know everything, Daniel. Every single thing." I let that sink in before adding, "And so will everyone else soon enough." Chris smiled. Daniel sucked in a sharp breath. "All right," he said, his voice clipped. "Where are you?" I glanced at Chris. He raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to make the call. I thought about it for a second, then made my decision. "Meet me here," I said. "Let's talk." Daniel hesitated. He was calculating, deciding if he could still spin this in his favor. Then finally, "Fine. Be there in 20. He hung up. I set my phone down and looked at Chris. He grinned. "Think he's actually coming?" "Oh, he's coming," I said. "But he has no idea what he's walking into." Chris and I didn't say much after that. There was nothing left to say. The wheels were already in motion, and both of us knew Daniel was about to walk into a situation he couldn't talk his way out of. We sat in silence, the occasional clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the low hum of conversation from the other booths filling the space between us. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, but underneath all the anger, all the betrayal, there was something else. Anticipation. For once, we were in control. I checked the time. Daniel would be here any minute. Chris tapped his fingers against the table, restless. "You ready for this?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah." It wasn't entirely true. There was still a part of me that wanted to believe Daniel would have some kind of explanation, some moment of regret, something to show that he was even remotely human. But deep down, I knew better. Chris leaned back in his seat, watching the door. Bet he walks in like nothing's wrong, smiling, acting like we're all just grabbing a late-night bite together. I nodded. He always did like to pretend he was the smartest guy in the room. Chris smirked. "Not tonight." The bell above the diner door jingled. We both turned at the same time, and there he was. Daniel walked in like he owned the place, like he belonged there, dressed in a casual button-down, sleeves rolled up, watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. He scanned the diner quickly, spotted us, and, just like Chris predicted, he smiled. Like this was just another night. Like he hadn't spent years lying to my face. He strode over to our booth, casual, confident, completely unfazed. Well, he said, sliding into the seat next to Chris, across from me. "This is a surprise." I didn't say anything. I just watched him. Chris, however, let out a short laugh. "Is it, though?" Daniel smirked, shaking his head. "Look, I get it. You're upset. But let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." Chris stiffened beside me. I felt my own hands curl into fists beneath the table. Daniel sighed, like we were the ones making this difficult. "All right, fine. Let's get this over with. What do you want to know?" Chris let out a breathless laugh. "Unbelievable." Daniel glanced at him. "What?" Chris shook his head, disbelief etched across his face. "You're not sorry. Not even a little bit." Daniel scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're acting like I killed someone." I finally spoke. "You didn't kill someone," I said, my voice calm. "You just spent years screwing over the two people who actually gave a damn about you." Daniel's smirk faltered slightly. "That's not fair." Chris let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, fair? Now you care about fair." Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "Look, I didn't plan for any of this to happen, all right? Things just went the way they went." Chris slammed his hand on the table, making Daniel jump. The few people in the diner glanced over, but Chris didn't care. "Stop acting like this was some accident," he snapped. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You chose this." Daniel's expression hardened. "And so what if I did?" Silence. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Daniel leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. "Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be the villain in some sob story you two cooked up. I did what I did. Jessica did what she did. And yeah, maybe you don't like it, but guess what?" He smirked. "Life goes on." Chris stared at him, pure disbelief in his eyes. "You actually have no conscience." Daniel shrugged. "You can sit here and cry about it, or you can move on. Your call." I had never wanted to hit someone more in my life, but I didn't, because I had a better idea. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. Daniel frowned. "What's this?" "Take a look," I said, my voice steady. He hesitated before glancing down at the screen, and then his whole expression changed, because staring back at him was an email addressed to his boss, with every single photo attached, every hotel, every date, every lie, his entire career on the line. Daniel's face went pale. "What the hell is this?" Chris grinned. "That is the beginning of the end for you, brother." Daniel's eyes snapped to mine. "You wouldn't." I tilted my head. "Wouldn't I?" His jaw tightened. "This is insane." "No," I said, voice deadly calm. "What's insane is thinking you could walk all over us and get away with it." Daniel looked back at the screen, hands clenched into fists. For the first time tonight, he wasn't in control. And he knew it. I leaned forward slightly. "You have two options, Daniel. 1. You come clean to your boss, your clients, everyone, before I send that email myself. Daniel's breathing was heavy now. And option 2? Chris smirked. We destroy you. Daniel's eyes darted between us, calculating. For the first time in his life, he was backed into a corner with no way out. And I had never felt so damn satisfied. Daniel's expression twisted into something I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't regret. It was fear. Not fear of losing me. Not fear of what he had done. No, Daniel was only afraid of consequences. I leaned back in my seat, calm, collected. I had been unraveling all night, watching my life fall apart in real time. But now I had never felt more in control. Chris tapped a finger against the table. Clock's ticking, big bro. Daniel's lips parted like he wanted to say something. Wanted to find a way out of this. But there wasn't one. He knew that. He swallowed hard. You don't have to do this. Chris scoffed. You really think you get a say in this? Daniel turned to me now, his voice lowering. Look, I get it. You're pissed. But think about what you're doing. You send that email, you don't just hurt me. You drag Jessica down with it too. I raised an eyebrow. And? Daniel blinked, caught off guard. He had expected me to hesitate. He thought the mention of Jessica would shake me, maybe even make me reconsider. But he had miscalculated. He and Jessica had played their little games, thinking they were untouchable. But now they were the ones standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for me to decide if they fell. Daniel's jaw tightened. All right, he said. Let's talk about what you really want. Chris rolled his eyes. You don't get to negotiate. Daniel ignored him. He was locked on me now, voice smooth, like he still believed he could manipulate his way out of this. You send that email, sure it'll ruin me, he admitted. But then what? You think that's gonna make you feel better? Think it'll undo what happened? I tilted my head. You seem nervous, Daniel. His smirk twitched, but he forced it back into place. You've never been a revenge guy. You're better than this. I let out a small, humorless chuckle. That's where you're wrong. Daniel exhaled sharply, shaking his head. All right. Fine. You want me to confess? Fine. I was sleeping with Jessica. I lied to you. I hurt you. Is that what you need to hear? Chris made a face. Wow. That was so sincere. Daniel shot him a glare. I'm trying to fix this. Chris laughed. Fix it? Oh, buddy. We're the ones fixing it. I checked the time on my phone, then tapped the screen. Looks like you're out of time. Daniel's face went stiff. Wait. I hovered my thumb over the send button. Daniel's breath was shaky now. His entire body was tense, fists clenched at his sides. For once, he wasn't smirking. He wasn't trying to act superior. He was begging. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. We can figure something out. Chris and I shared a glance. Then, without a word, I pressed send. Daniel's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He snatched his phone from his pocket, scrambling to check his email. And when he really saw it, his entire face drained of color. His career, over. His reputation, destroyed. Everything he had built on lies, gone. For the first time, Daniel looked small. Chris let out a slow whistle. Well, that was satisfying. Daniel shot up from his seat, gripping the edge of the table. You're making a mistake. I met his gaze steady. No, Daniel. You did. He stood there for a long moment, chest rising and falling rapidly, like he was waiting for me to take it back, to fix the mess he had made. I didn't. Daniel's hands twitched at his sides. His eyes flicked to Chris, then back to me. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out of the diner. Chris let out a breath, shaking his head. Wow! I stared at the door, watching it swing shut behind him. And just like that, it was over. Chris leaned back in the booth, stretching his arms. So what now? I thought about it. About Jessica. Alone at home, sipping her wine like she hadn't just lost everything. About Daniel, pacing somewhere, trying to figure out how to salvage the wreckage of his life. And then, finally, about myself. About freedom. I exhaled slowly, the weight of everything lifting from my shoulders. Now, I said, meeting Chris's gaze. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. Now I move on.